Well, Happy New Year to you all. For this last lecture on Nick Hornby's Fever Pitch, I thought I would begin by explaining the historical context for the autobiography, and in particular the soccer-related disasters that are either mentioned in the book or discussed in detail. I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation on these disasters, the first at Ibrox in Glasgow, Scotland, the second at Bradford in the north of England, and the third at Heysel in Belgium, and the final one, the fourth one, at Hillsborough, again in the north of England. And it does make for very grim reading. What struck me as I was putting together this information for the PowerPoint presentation was the fact that the very short space of time, 4 years from 1985 to 1989, in which the last three of these catastrophes at Bradford, Heysel and Hillsborough took place. As Hornby describes them, each of these disasters arose, at least in part, from the authorities' institutionalised neglect of their fans. The Bradford fire was caused by trash that had accumulated under seats, catching light. The crush against and the collapse of a wall in the Heysel Stadium in Belgium that caused the deaths of 39 Juventus fans was partly due to literally crumbling infrastructure in the stadium itself and inadequate police presence and police training. And finally, the horrific crush at the Liverpool-Nottingham Forest semi-final at Hillsborough was, according to the official Taylor report, mainly due to the failure of police control. But on the other hand, Hornby also points out how the rise of hooliganism and violence in the 70s and 80s also led to these disasters, particularly at Heysel, where the practice of running or invading the opposition fans' territory en masse led to the deaths of the Juventus fans. They weren't used to this practice, they panicked and there was a crush, and this is what led to the deaths. And I think the repercussions of hooliganism are also made clear in Hornby's discussion of the Hillsborough disaster. The barriers that were designed to prevent pitch invasions caused the crush that led to the 96 deaths. I think we can see from Hornby's description of these various disasters and references to them how the objective of crowd control changed in the 70s and 80s from ensuring the public safety of large crowds to the prevention of hooliganism by a small minority. And this led to the perception that all soccer fans were animals and therefore needed to be caged. And that's literally what these barriers were, these protective barriers were. They were cages, and when they failed to collapse under the weight of fans, that's when the Hillsborough disaster took place. So these two disasters, Heysel and Hillsborough, had profound consequences for the subsequent development of English football. English teams were banned from European competition after Heysel until 1990 to 1991 season. More importantly, after Hillsborough, the Taylor report led to the elimination of all terraces or standing areas in football stadiums in England and Scotland. This profound change to the stadiums resulted in huge increases in ticket prices, and for many clubs this casual spectator became a thing of the past, to be replaced by fans who were exclusively season ticket holders and were in a financial position to pay out thousands of pounds in order to become season ticket holders. Now, this radical change in the economic and demographic profile of the average soccer fan helped curb violence in the 90s and led to what's been described as the gentrification of the game as middle-class fans returned to stadiums. On the one hand, Hornby is all in favour of all-seater stadiums, but on the other he decries middle-class fans as fair-weather friends who will not show the same kind of loyalty to the clubs that he does. But what's interesting here is that Fever Pitch itself, as a best-selling book on soccer, not only describes this process of gentrification, but also, I think, participates in it, because Hornby demonstrates to his readers that the trials and tribulations of a soccer fan are actually worthy topics for literature. You can see Hornby's playful attitude to making soccer a subject of literary inquiry when he quotes from canonical works of English literature in an ironic fashion. For example, when Hornby writes, "I have measured out my life in Arsenal fixtures," he is riffing on a line from T.S. Eliot's famous 1920 poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, in which the speaker laments, "I have measured out my life with coffee spoons." When Hornby writes, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that ticket distribution for cup finals is a farce," he's ironically invoking the famous opening line of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. But I think the real appeal of this book is not in its playful subversion of literary expectations, but rather in the author's painfully honest self-examination of his own soccer obsession. That's why he describes the chapter from NW3 to N17. By the way, these are the postcodes or zip codes he's travelling from. In the chapter he's travelling from Hampstead, which is a rather posh area of London, where his psychiatrist's office is, to N17, which is the area of London where, less posh area of London where Tottenham Hotspur's White Hart Lane ground is. So in this chapter he's making this journey from his psychiatrist's office to watch a semi-final replay in the Littlewoods Cup between Arsenal and Tottenham. And he describes this chapter as the centre of the book, even though it's spatially not in the centre at all. But I think it is the emotional core of the book, because it is here, finally, that he begins to shake the depression that's afflicted him throughout his 20s, and that the fever which seized him at 11 finally abates, and he can acknowledge that his own personal destiny and that of Arsenal Football Club are not inextricably linked. Thanks very much.